Don't you love it when you go in for a trim and in the stylist's mind, trim somehow translates to chop it all off? On the upside, this feels nice, gotta admit. All right, so today I wanted to talk a little bit about the problem with sword fighting compared to other martial arts, unarmed in particular, that I don't usually see talked about. So when it comes to developing a skill, any skill really, what you need to do, you need to put in a lot of time. You need to get the reps in, right? Whatever it may be. There's a lot to learn, and the only way you can learn and get better is by making mistakes. If you make mistakes in an unarmed fight, it's gonna hurt. You might get injured, you might get knocked out. What can go wrong in a sword fight? Well,
we call it a draw.
That's generally something that comes in a lot of the time when people talk about things like, oh, the spinning back fist works in MMA sometimes. And spinning kicks and this and that. True, they can definitely be viable if done well at the right time. But that doesn't really translate as well to a sword fight. Can you spin in a sword fight? Yes. Can you do it without getting killed? Maybe, depending on the situation. It's more suitable against multiple opponents. I still have that on my to-do list to make a video about when spinning actually makes sense with a sword. But either way, so the problem is, if something goes wrong in an MMA fight, it can get ugly. People have gotten seriously injured. And there are some fatalities that happened. I can't even use that word without thinking, finish it.
Fatality.
Anyway, so bad things can and have happened in unarmed fighting, on the street, of course, in particular. So, bad stuff. You can get bones broken, etc., concussions, skull fractures, not so bad things. But that still pales in comparison to having your head cleft. I believe that's the correct form. All kinds of horrific things could happen, which would be even worse back then with their medicine. And once a limb is too damaged by cuts or thrust or blunt impact trauma, they might just have to amputate it. Without anesthesia, without antibiotics, without antiseptics, without even washing their hands. That's quite a recent idea. Even Victorian doctors laughed at that. Anyway, so my point is the stakes are extremely high, but if you want to learn and get better, you have to do it. Now, of course, there is sparring, there are wooden swords, but even with wooden swords, the risk is pretty significant, of course. I mean, if you spar too hard, unarmed, you can get concussions, and repeated concussions lead to brain damage. I mean, basically they are brain damage. So that's not good either. But, getting clobbered with a wooden sword, again, a little bit more potential for lasting damage, particularly if you don't practice with eye protection, which I don't know of any evidence that they did in the Middle Ages. Not really in the Renaissance either, correct me if I'm wrong. So losing teeth or an eye or breaking a bone that is not set properly so that it heals out of alignment and things of that nature that can leave you permanently disabled, that is very likely in this kind of practice. And then it's still not the real deal. No matter how closely you try to stick to the sources, no matter how real you try to keep it, there's just a different dynamic in this sort of simulation. Particularly the fact that you fight the same people over and over again, to the point where you get to know them. Whereas fighting in a real duel with sharp blades, the first serious hit, or maybe the first few hits, would just end it there, and chances are you would never face that person again. And there are a lot of variables that you can't really account for in sparring. whether a light hit would actually be incapacitating or not, how much it would hinder you if you were able to continue fighting. So what I'm trying to say is, even though proper training did prepare people back in history for real duels, even the best training is not the same as a real fight, but it carries a certain risk of injury, which might leave you worse off in the long run. An experience from real sword fights would be extremely valuable because of just how risky it was and how high the chance was of not being able to progress from there because you were killed or maimed. Oh, I fell for that one. I'll do better next round. I can't feel the left side of my body. If you think about battlefields, what on earth are you? You're something really loud, but I don't know what you are. Anyway, what the hell was I saying? Oh yeah, battlefields. So on the battlefield, you're less solely dependent on your skill because there's so many other factors. As an individual combatant, you're actually more reliant on the skill of your superiors, tactics and supplies and armor and, the guys next to you, things like that. It doesn't come down just to you and your skill. Like, it's still, you're going to want to improve as much as you can. You would want to learn from whatever experience you manage to survive. But it's not just that. Whereas in an unarmed, one-on-one sword fight, it's all about the skill. That's all you got. So skill you need to get more of, but to get more of it, you have to risk life and limb, which may prevent you from becoming better. So is this the ultimate Darwinian evolution thing where, the best swordsman would survive? Well, sometimes the best swordsman might get killed off. Like, they would have been the best, they would have had the potential, but then they got killed too early on in their progression, you know what I mean? But then again, it may also be a bit too easy to look at it through the lens of all or nothing, fight to the death. That wasn't always done. Judicial duels might happen to first blood or even to a set number of blows. That's really more for nobles in full armor, which, it's not that risky to begin with. So it didn't always end with someone dying or being irreparably injured, so to speak. Sometimes they recovered. Sometimes they recovered from rapier thrusts through the chest, multiples in some cases. So humans are able to survive some gnarly things, but they can also be incredibly fragile. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing. Nowadays, that's not an issue. I mean, again, it is to an extent, because in HEMA, injuries can accumulate. You get older, things of that nature, but it's a different story, And that's the nice thing about RPG settings, or fantasy settings in general, where characters can come back from mortal injuries. They can be healed, resurrected in some cases. Necromancers, just healers with bad timing. So it's kind of nice to imagine a setting where fighting is not quite as perilous, where you have more chance to develop mastery because you make it for longer. I mean, obviously, there are historical fencing masters who wrote treatises who obviously made it long enough to write those. Although, in case of good old Meyer, he died on the way to delivering the manuscript. Not from fight, but illness, so there's that. But anyway, this is getting too rambly. I think I've been going on for too long already. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Hope you found this stimulating, I suppose is the word. Maybe it got the gears spinning, I don't know. So thanks for watching and have a good one.